So when I'm looking for creative inspiration for my writing, I like to go for walks. I could be out for 45 minutes, no podcast, no music, no nothing, just me and my thoughts. And I like to reflect on what I've written so far, and hopefully through those reflections, I find new creative inspirations for what to write next, either for an entirely new book or for books I'm currently working on. And so, about a couple weeks ago, I was stuck with my Tiberius novel, which, you don't know, was what I was working on for NaNoWriMo, and I'm trying to get back into. I made it to 50,000 words. I'm a little over 50,000 words now, but I want to potentially finish it, hopefully, by the end of the year. And I went out for a walk to try to find inspiration on how to continue with the novel, mainly in how I'm going to progress the character of Tiberius. And it was through these talkings that my mind went on to what comes after the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and that is the War of the Four Emperors. And it is a very interesting time because these four emperors, it's called the Year of the Four Emperors, and it consists of four patrician governors, generals of Rome, who had varying levels of prestige during the later emperors of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, starting with Tiberius. Some were in favor of Claudius and others were in favor of Nero, all competing to be emperor of Rome within this course of a year and causing a tremendous amount of bloodshed in the meantime. And so purely by accident, my mind started to wander about this era and how someone could conceivably write a story about the Year of the Four Emperors in a satisfying way, which there might be already be novels about this era. I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but my mind wandered nonetheless, and I sort of was comparing this period of just pure chaos in ancient Rome in the wake of the also tumultuous reign of Emperor Nero and then the subsequent rise of Vespasian, is like how would someone accurately, capture this broad chaos, this chaos that's now only remembered in historical terms? And my mind sort of by accident slipped to Virginia Woolf into The Lighthouse. And if you've not read To the Lighthouse, I did a video on it about a year ago, and one of the greatest elements about that book, it's one of my favorite books of all time, but one of the greatest elements about the book is the narrative itself. So if you don't know, To the Lighthouse is split up in three distinct parts. Parts 1 and 3 have a more traditional narrative, but part 2 is where the narrative breaks away from that traditional sense and becomes probably the most omnipotent narrative voice I've ever experienced in a novel, and it completely blew me away the time of reading because I did not see it coming, and I've gone back and reread sections of it, and it's still just as impactful on rereads because nothing in prose for me has really captured this feeling of the passage of time in a completely omnipotent way, a completely emotionally detached way, but it's that emotional detachment and you're seeing characters in part 1 die just being stated very naturally with just general passing of time, because I think it covers parts of World War One as well, so extreme amount of violence during this period of England and European history in general. And it's through that emotional detachment that you feel an attachment and emotional sadness, because the time these characters, even though they're built up very effectively in part 1, ultimately the passage of time is indifferent and everyone meets their demise. And so I was kind of relating these two periods of just if you lived in the era of the Year of the Four Emperors, and even just around the era in general, if you were alive then, you were probably alive during Nero's reign too, just extreme amount of violence that when you read Suetonius, it does a good job capturing it, but you don't get that emotional grit to it because it happened so long ago, and ultimately it's more focused on the emperors themselves than the common people who are probably had a lot worse. And so I was kind of comparing these two things and trying to find a way to bring them together, and ultimately I've yet to find a more satisfying narrative style to tell the story than in the way that Virginia Woolf tells To the Lighthouse. And so just for some general background on the history, the Year of the Four Emperors does follow the fall of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. So Nero's death is followed by Galba's reign as emperor, which is only just a few months long. He was an older, rich patrician governor and general. He is then murdered by his Praetorian Guard because his reign was very bloody in Rome, and then Otho, who's another general, takes the throne. And then Otho goes to war against Vitellius, who is another patrician general, governor, very popular, famous, rich. They go to war in Germania, and Otho loses and kills himself. Vitellius comes to Rome as emperor, and his reign is bloody and tragic. And then Vespasian, who is governing Judea at the time, marches in on Rome. Vitelix is already dead by the time Vespasian comes to Rome, and then his reign triggers the Flavian dynasty, which lasts a little over a decade, several decades, but it's not really very peaceful. It's peaceful for Vespasian and Titus's reign, and then Domitian comes to power, and then that triggers the fall of the Flavian dynasty. So, and the point of this novel, if I ever get around to writing it, would be to try to do what Virginia Woolf did, which is basically tell this omnipotent story while also triggering emotional reaction from the reader through this narrative detachment. And I don't know how I'd be able to do it because Virginia Woolf is one of the best writers of all time, and I'm not. So it would be incredibly difficult to try to mimic, not even mimic, but try to thematically connect the two styles together, history and because again, Two Lighthouses does kind of read like a really strange version of history, and so I don't really know how I would draw the two together, but so far it feels like a perfect combination to me in order to tell the story. And this draws into like a larger story I want to tell with ancient Rome. So basically, as I just said, I'm currently writing a book about Tiberius, which follows a traditional like third-person narrative, very sort of George R. Martin-esque, where I like to have like italicized phrases, which would mean like the inner monologue of the character. I love that style, and I think I want to plan a trilogy. So the first would be the book about Tiberius, which would follow his youth, basically, part of his youth. So it would start when he's in his early 20s, going off to his first campaign in Germania, and then it would end with his willing exile to Rhodes. And then for another book I have in mind, I want to tell Claudius's reign, but through the perspective of Messalina. And I haven't thought about this one as much, but if I was going to, it would be like a first-person narrative, so not third-person, but completely from the perspective of Messalina. And then finally, I would have this story, which if I was to write it, it would not be too long. The Reign of the Four Emperors, told in a Virginia Woolf to Lighthouse style. To the Lighthouse itself is only 57,000 words. And I think like that would be a very good length for this book as well if I was to ever write it. And so like it would be 3 books of like this Rome trilogy, this Julio-Claudian-esque trilogy, each one with a different narrative style. One covering Tiberius, he was the first like actual I'm an emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and then Messalina's story, which would take place in the middle of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and then this Year of the Four Emperors, which would take place at the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. So it'd be like kind of like maybe post-apocalyptic in a way, which I think would be kind of cool to meld the style, because even To the Lighthouse is kind of post-apocalyptic in its showing of the passage of time in a weird way. So these are my ramblings. I want to do more authortube videos, and I just really wanted to. This is sort of an experiment to see if like people are interested in these types of videos where I just kind of talk about random ideas that I have, and then conceivably I could go back to this video if I do decide to ever pursue this project. It would be like a perfect NaNoWriMo project, I would say, because NaNoWriMo is it happens in November, but also happens in other months of the year as well. But the big one is in November, and you write 1,667 words a day, and then by the end of the month, by the end of November, you have 50,000 word manuscript. So if I did want this book to be shorter, 60,000 words, let's just say, by the end of November, I would be 5/6 of the way through the novel. But then again, I don't. This idea is kind of vague to me, so it gives me a lot of time to really think about it, if I actually want to pursue it or not. But then, I'll have this video to go back to if I do decide to, and see. It'd be interesting to see how it changes, because there's no way the final product would ever be exactly how I'm describing it right now. So yeah, those are my ruminations. I don't know what you should comment. Just tell me, what are your crazy book ideas, I guess? What book ideas do you have that you could conceivably see yourself writing, but you're not, like, they're just so abstract at this moment that you don't necessarily think you're going to write them? Yeah, so let me know what you think about that. And thank you if you made it this far. I appreciate your endurance, and hope I'll see you in the next video. Bye.